So what if the most exhausting, like soul-crushing failure you've ever experienced in your life
Mm.
was actually the most successful moment of your entire existence?
Oh, wow. That is a really heavy question to start with.
Right. But I want you to really think about it for a second, because what if our whole modern obsession with, efficiency and life hacks and getting things done as fast as possible is actually destroying the structural integrity of our character?
Yeah, I mean, we are totally obsessed with the shortcut right now.
Exactly. So today we're taking a really long, hard look at a 19th century text that completely upends how we view the daily grind. We were talking about the profound and honestly sometimes really uncomfortable philosophy behind why we work, why we struggle, and why we build.
And it is a radical reframing of reality, I think, because, we spend the vast majority of our waking hours engaged in some form of labor, right?
Usually staring at a screen.
Right, but we rarely pause to question the metaphysical purpose of that effort. So we are returning today to the really dense, highly esoteric, but incredibly rewarding pages of Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma.
Yes, we are diving back into the thick of it.
We are. And specifically, we're unpacking chapter 22 today, which is titled The Night of the Royal Axe.
And just for anyone who wasn't with us for the previous deep dive into chapter 21, let's quickly set the stage.
Good idea.
We spent that entire last discussion looking at justice and accountability.
Hmm?
And it was, very abstract.
Very theoretical.
Yeah, theoretical. We were basically looking at the architectural blueprints for a moral life. You look at a pristine, three-dimensional rendering of a building on a computer screen, and you say, that's it. That's the ideal.
But blueprints don't have to deal with gravity.
Exactly. Or mud, or, I don't know, supply chain issues.
Yeah.
So today is about what happens when you actually step onto the physical construction site.
Precisely. Chapter 21 was theory. Chapter 22 is execution.
Excellent.
Right. It is the absolute definition of where theory violently collides with physical reality. I mean, Pike published Morals and Dogma way back in 1871.
Right, as a guide for the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry.
Exactly. And it's this massive synthesis of world religions and ancient philosophies. But the core thread running through this specific chapter is deeply practical.
Like boots on the ground practical.
Yes. If justice and accountability are the rules of a meaningful life, then work, dedication, and perseverance are the actual mechanisms that build that life.
The mechanism. I really like that word.
Yeah.
Because, you can have the most just, accountable mindset in the entire world, but if you don't actually do anything with it,
It's just a thought experiment.
right, it's just an incredibly arrogant thought experiment.
Yeah.
So for you listening right now, whether you're trying to master a complex new skill, whether you're trying to build a career from the ground up, or maybe you're just trying to rewire your own daily habits and get out of a rut,
We've all been there.
for sure. Well, this deep dive is going to serve as a very sharp philosophical toolkit for your daily life.
Okay, let's start with the title of the chapter itself because it immediately sets the tone, right? The Night of the Royal Axe.
Which honestly, to a modern ear, sounds like a character from a high fantasy role-playing game or something.
It really does.
Oh.
But we have to understand the historical and symbolic context that Pike is drawing from here.
Right, we're not talking about dragon.
No, no dragons. This specific Masonic degree, the 22nd degree, is also known as the Prince of Labanus, and it draws on the ancient history of the Sidonians.
And who were they, exactly?
They were the people who were basically responsible for felling the massive cedar trees on Mount Lebanon.
Ah, okay. The famous cedars.
Exactly. These were the very trees used to build the legendary Temple of Solomon.
Oh, wow. So we aren't talking about, knights in shining armor jousting on horseback. We're talking about lumberjacks.
We are talking about lumberjacks.
We're talking about heavy, dangerous, callous-building physical labor up in the mountains.
Precisely. And the axe is the central symbol here. I mean, an axe is a tool of transformation, but it is a really violent one.
Yeah, it takes a lot of force.
It requires massive physical exertion to wield. It separates the useless from the useful. It takes a raw, chaotic element of nature, like a towering tree, and through sweat, danger, and pure skill, transforms it into the foundational material for a sacred structure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Pike is using this imagery to introduce his core concept, right? The absolute dignity of labor.
Yes, the dignity of labor. He argues that work is not merely a biological necessity for survival. It is a profound, irreplaceable source of human meaning.
Okay, I buy that in theory. The idea of taking the invisible, like our thoughts, our intentions, our moral framework, and transmuting it into something visible in the real world.
It's a beautiful idea.
And it's like alchemy, really.
Yeah,
But I have to push back here on behalf of the very, very tired modern workforce.
fair enough. Go ahead.
Because, Pike was a 19th century intellectual. He didn't know what the gig economy was.
No, he definitely did not.
He didn't know what it meant to drive for Uber for 12 hours, log off, and then, deliver groceries for another 4 hours just to make rent.
Right. The modern grind it's very different.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And if you tell someone in that position that their exhausting, highly transactional labor is supposed to be this, dignified character-building exercise, they might just throw their phone at the wall.
I wouldn't blame him.
Right. So isn't this philosophy of the Knight of the Royal Axe just kind of a luxury for the privileged who actually get to choose what they build?
That is the essential modern critique, and it is entirely valid to bring up. I mean, if we're going to apply a 19th century text to a 21st century reality, we have to interrogate the text.
They got to hold his feet to the fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is that Pike makes a very subtle but crucial psychological distinction between what we might call drudgery and what he calls work.
Okay. What's the difference? Because to the guy delivering groceries at 2 a.m., it probably all feels the same physically.
Right. The physical task itself isn't the difference. The difference is the intention driving the task.
So you're saying the alchemy isn't in the spreadsheet or the steering wheel. It's in the mind of the person doing the task.
Exactly. Think about it. When you view your labor entirely as a transaction like, I'm giving you my time, you're giving me money so I can survive, the labor just drains you.
Yeah, soul crushing.
It becomes drudgery. You are basically operating as a machine part. But if that exact same Uber driver frames their 12-hour shift, not as a transaction with some faceless tech company, but as a deliberate, intentional sacrifice to, say, fund their child's education.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Or to bootstrap their own small business. The nature of the labor transforms entirely. The physical exhaustion is identical.
Your back still hurts.
Your back still hurts. But the psychological reality is totally different. The drive becomes the swing of the axe. The dignity doesn't come from the glamour of the job. The dignity comes from the fierce, undeniable agency of the person doing it.
Man, that is a really fascinating psychological pivot. Because the physical reality of the mud doesn't change, right?
Yeah.
But your relationship to the mud changes.
Exactly.
Like, if I am forced into the mud, I am a victim. But if I choose to step into the mud because I am building a foundation, I am an architect.
Yes. And this actually ties perfectly into modern neurobiology, too.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, we know now that when a human being engages in a difficult task willingly with a clear sense of purpose, entirely different neural pathways are activated compared to when they are forced to do the exact same task against their will.
Wait, really? The brain literally reacts differently based on intention?
Yes. The friction of voluntary struggle actually releases neurochemicals that build resilience and focus. It literally changes the physical structure of your brain.
That is wild.
So the alchemy Pike is talking about isn't just a metaphor. When you force your brain and body to focus on a frustrating task for a higher purpose, you are literally alchemizing new neural pathways. The friction creates myelin in your brain, which insulates your neural circuits, making you objectively faster and more capable. Work is the physical bridge that connects intention with reality.
But that implies that effort alone isn't enough, right? Because I can go out in my backyard right now and I can expend a massive amount of physical energy and willpower just digging a ditch for 10 hours.
Sure, you could.
I'm sweating, I'm choosing to do it, I'm experiencing that friction. But if I don't have a reason for that ditch, if it doesn't connect to anything, I haven't dignified myself. I've just exhausted myself.
Right, you've just made a hole.
Exactly. So effort without direction is just entropy.
Right, which brings us perfectly to the necessity of the blueprint.
The blueprint.
Right.
Yeah.
The Knight of the Royal Axe doesn't just wander into the forest and start swinging wildly at every piece of bark he sees. That would be total madness.
You just ruin a bunch of trees.
Yeah. He selects a specific tree. He knows exactly what dimensions of wood are required for the temple, and he cuts with precision. Work must be intentional, meaningful, and strictly directed toward a goal.
Right.
Building with purpose means you aren't just trying to achieve the temporary satisfaction of being busy. You are building to create lasting value.
Being busy. Man, that is the modern disease right there.
It really is an epidemic.
We are so obsessed with the illusion of action. We will sit down answer 75 emails in an hour, reorganize our desktop folders into like color-coded categories, and feel like we've absolutely conquered the world.
Yes, the dopamine hit of the
Yes,
checklist.
but in reality, we've just been swinging an axe at thin air. We haven't built anything of lasting value.
Because building lasting value requires deep, sustained dedication. And Pike defines dedication not as a sudden burst of motivation.
Because motivation fades, right?
Motivation always fades. He defines it as the sustained, structured application of energy over time. Dedication is what separates mere intention from actual achievement.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Look at our daily lives right now. Our phones are buzzing every 3 minutes. Our inboxes are constantly overflowing. The 24-hour news cycle is literally engineered by behavioral psychologists to hijack our attention.
It's an attention economy.
It demands our constant, exhausting outrage. So if dedication is the bridge between intention and achievement, how does the listener actually protect their intention from an environment that is basically weaponized to distract them?
That is the defining challenge of our era. To protect your intention, you have to fundamentally change your relationship with time and reward.
How do you mean?
Well, distractions, the buzzing phone, the social media feed, the quick email reply, they offer immediate microdoses of gratification.
Little dopamine hits.
Exactly. They trigger small spikes of dopamine that give you the neurochemical illusion of accomplishment without the burden of actual effort.
Yeah.
You feel like you did something, but you built nothing.
Wow, the illusion of accomplishment. That hurts because it's so true.
Pike's concept of lasting value requires a much longer time horizon. You have to be captivated by the idea of constructing something that endures long after that cheap dopamine spike fades.
It's kind of like the difference between eating processed sugar for a quick rush and planting an orchard that takes 10 years to fruit.
That's a great way to put it.
The sugar is immediate, but it rots your teeth. The orchard requires a decade of really hard labor before you see a single apple, but it will feed your family for generations.
And this requires a daily, relentless recommitment. Dedication isn't a box you check once. You don't wake up on January 1st, set a New Year's resolution, and permanently possess dedication.
If only it worked that way.
Right. Dedication is a choice you make hour by hour. Every single time you choose to sit with the discomfort of deep work rather than picking up your phone, you are swinging the axe with purpose. You are actively reinforcing the cognitive habit of dedication.
Let's really ground this in reality for a second. Think about your own life right now, listening to this.
Yeah.
Think about the projects, the creative pursuits, or even the relationships you've started with. Incredibly high intention.
We all have a few of those.
Oh, for sure. The blueprint was beautiful. You were so excited. You bought all the gear. You downloaded the productivity apps. You told everyone at a dinner party what you were going to do.
You ordered the special notebook.
Yes, the fancy leather notebook. But then you abandon it. And if you were really honest with yourself, you didn't abandon it because you suddenly decided it was a bad idea.
No, the idea was still good.
You abandoned it because you hit the inevitable gap between the blueprint and the building. You hit the exact point where the initial dopamine of the idea wore off and the actual boring, arduous physical reality of the work began.
It is the universal human graveyard of good intentions. We fall in love with the pristine blueprint, but we recoil at the mud of the construction site.
We hate the mud.
We do. And the reason we recoil is that we fail to anticipate the sheer amount of friction that reality guarantees.
Well, let's talk about that fiction, because even if you have the best blueprint in the world, and even if you wake up with ironclad dedication, a storm is inevitably going to hit the site.
It's guaranteed.
The supply chain breaks down, the wood rots, you get sick, the market crashes. How does the philosophy of the Knight of the Royal Axe handle that kind of unavoidable external chaos?
It handles it by accepting chaos as the curriculum.
Chaos as the curriculum. I like that.
Challenges are not an anomaly that temporarily interrupts your progress. They are the fundamental material of the progress itself. The text insists that the knight must persist through setbacks and absolutely refuse to yield to the difficulty.
So you can't just pause and wait for the storm to pass.
No. Progress in this worldview is forged exclusively through this persistence. It is emphatically not achieved through shortcuts.
Wait, let's unpack that. Because if structural integrity is actually born from the friction of the struggle, then optimizing our lives for pure convenience is actually destroying us.
That is the logical conclusion, yes.
I'm thinking about how we live today. We want the 10-minute workout for perfect health. We want the life hack to double our income overnight. We have everything delivered directly to our door, so we don't even have to experience the friction of walking through a grocery store.
Friction is viewed as the enemy.
So what does this all mean? If Pike is right, then this entire culture of extreme convenience isn't making us happier, it's making us structurally weaker. We are literally starving ourselves of the friction required to build character.
This raises an important question, right? It's a brilliant deduction, and it cuts to the very heart of why this 19th century text feels so urgent today. Consider a metaphor from botany.
Okay, I'm with you.
If you plant a tree in a perfectly controlled, climate-regulated greenhouse, it will shoot up incredibly fast. It has optimal water, optimal light, and zero wind resistance.
Sounds like a pretty good life for a tree.
It is the ultimate convenience environment. It is the shortcut. But the wood of that tree will be incredibly soft, and its root system will be incredibly shallow.
Ah, I see.
The moment you take that greenhouse tree and plant it outside on a windy cliff, the very first storm will just snap it in half.
Because it never experienced the stress required to build strong fibers.
Exactly. Now compare that to a tree that grows naturally on the cliff edge. It grows agonizingly slowly. It is constantly battered by the wind, the freezing rain, the harsh sun.
It's fighting for its life every day.
But every time the wind hits that tree, the stress forces the root system to drive deeper into the bedrock. The constant friction forces the cells of the wood to become dense and unbreakable.
So the storm's actually building the tree.
Yes. The friction isn't stopping the tree's progress. The friction is the exact mechanism that ensures the tree's survival.
Wow. That fundamentally changes how you view frustration. I want to paint a picture for you listening. Let's say you decide to learn the new language, right? You start out, and it's fun.
The honeymoon phase.
Yeah, you learn how to say hello, you learn how to order a coffee, you are making fast progress on your little app, you feel great. But then maybe like 3 months in, you hit the inevitable plateau.
It always happens.
The grammar gets really complex.
Yeah.
You try to have a real conversation with a native speaker, and you completely freeze up. Your brain just goes blank. You feel intensely stupid, embarrassed, and frustrated.
It's a terrible feeling.
And your modern instinct, or cultural instinct, is to interpret that negative feeling as a signal to quit.
Yeah.
You tell yourself, I guess I'm just not good at languages, or I just don't have the time for this right now.
And both of those reactions completely rob you of the actual prize.
Yeah.
According to Pike's philosophy, that intense frustration isn't a sign that you should quit. That frustration is the wind hitting the tree.
The wind on the cliff.
Yes. It is the exact necessary material required to build the next level of cognitive progress. When your brain is struggling to recall the vocabulary word, when you are sweating through the embarrassment of speaking poorly, that is the very moment your neural root system is being forced to grow deeper.
So if you take a shortcut around that frustration, say maybe you just whip out a translation app on your phone instead, you might achieve the immediate goal of ordering the sandwich. But you will never actually speak the language.
Never.
You bypass the friction, and therefore you bypass the structural change within yourself. Patience isn't just passively sitting at a bus stop waiting for fluency to arrive. Patience is active consistency in the face of deep discomfort.
Which brings us to what I believe is the most challenging and ultimately the most liberating realization of this entire chapter.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, we've established that work is dignified. We've established the absolute need for a blueprint. We've established that we cannot take shortcuts around the friction, but we must now face the nightmare scenario.
The nightmare scenario. That sounds ominous.
What happens if you do everything right?
Okay.
You put in the honest labor, you dedicate yourself, you persist through the storms, but the external project still fails. The business you poured your entire life savings into goes bankrupt. The manuscript you worked on for 3 years is rejected by every single publisher. The bookshelf you built literally collapses under the weight of the books.
That is the paralyzing fear right there. That is the exact reason most people never even pick up the axe in the first place.
Yeah.
Because the logic is, if I put all this exhausting, honest labor in and it fails anyway, wasn't it all just a massive, humiliating waste of my finite time on Earth?
And if we view the world purely through a transactional, results-obsessed lens, then yes, it was a waste of time.
Right.
But the Knight of the Royal Axe operates on a profoundly different metaphysical level. The central thesis of Pike's chapter is this: effort possesses intrinsic value, completely and entirely, regardless of the external outcome.
Regardless of the outcome, you understand how insane that sounds to a culture where our entire identity is tied to our visible external success.
Oh, I know. It's heresy today.
If you don't get the trophy, if you don't get the IPO, if you don't get the viral post, The effort is viewed as a total loss.
It sounds insane until you realize what work is actually doing behind the scenes. We think we are using work to build a project, but the profound secret of the Royal Axe is that the project is just a Trojan horse.
A Trojan horse.
It's bait. The work is actually a mechanism designed to build you.
Say more about that, the Trojan horse concept.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, human beings are notoriously bad at internal self-improvement for its own sake.
Oh, for sure.
It is very hard to just sit alone in a room and decide, I am going to become more disciplined, more resilient, and more patient. We need a physical anvil upon which to strike the hammer.
We need something to do.
Exactly. We need an external object, a business, a garden, a piece of art, a really difficult career, to basically trick ourselves into engaging with the friction. The dignity of labor we discussed at the very beginning isn't about the specific widget produced on the assembly line.
It's not about the wooden temple.
No. The true value is the discipline, the moral fortitude, and the character forged in the mind and body of the producer.
Because what you do repeatedly shapes exactly who you become. Work is essentially a mirror reflecting our internal character back to us in real time.
Exactly. The Knight of the Royal Axe develops their character entirely through action, not through abstract contemplation. Growth happens strictly through the effort applied. The profound lessons of life are derived from the visceral experience of the work itself, not from the applause of the crowd at the end.
So, if effort has intrinsic value regardless of the outcome, let's ask the most important question we can ask today. Think about a past failure in your life.
We all have it.
A massive project that blew up in your face. A goal you worked incredibly hard for, bled for, but ultimately did not achieve. How do you reframe that devastating failure using the philosophy of the Royal Axe?
You reframe it by completely separating your ego from the external material result. Because progress is an internal process, every single ounce of physical and emotional energy you invested in that failed project structurally reinforced your mental resilience.
Okay, let's go back to that business that went bankrupt.
Perfect example. The LLC might be dissolved. The money might be completely gone. But the sheer grit you built by working 80-hour weeks, the complex problem-solving architecture your brain developed when the supply chain broke down.
That myelin we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The emotional regulation and empathy you had to practice when dealing with terrified employees and angry clients, that did not evaporate when the business closed.
You own that.
You own it permanently. It is built into the bedrock of your character. The building collapsed, but the builder leveled up.
The builder leveled up. I love that. The external world is chaotic. It is fundamentally unpredictable. You cannot control whether a pandemic or a market crash or a literal hurricane destroys the physical thing you spent years building.
You have zero control over that.
But you have absolute sovereign control over the effort you apply to the building of it. And therefore, you have absolute control over the character that is forged in the fire of that process.
That is the truest essence of the 22nd degree. It is a philosophy of relentless, purposeful action that is entirely insulated against the despair of external failure by a profound understanding of internal growth.
Because the growth is the point.
Yes. There's literally no such thing as wasted effort, as long as the effort was intentional and honest. If you are swinging the axe with purpose, you are succeeding at the ultimate goal, which is the forging of your own soul.
As we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to step out of the 19th century and look directly at your life right now. We've covered a lot of philosophical ground today, from the mountains of Lebanon to the modern gig economy, from the neurobiology of frustration to the Trojan horse of failure. But philosophy, as we established earlier, is totally useless if it stays as a pristine blueprint in your head.
It demands execution.
So I want you to seriously reflect on the core questions posed by this text. Look at your daily habits. Look at what you are currently building. How committed are you really to your goals right now?
It's a tough question to answer, honestly.
Are you operating with daily, active dedication? Or are you just relying on fleeting bursts of dopamine and motivation? When you face the inevitable friction, when the language gets hard, when the client gets angry, when the wood won't cut straight, do you view that friction as an excuse to quit? Or do you recognize it as the exact wind required to drive your roots deeper?
The storm on the cliff.
Do you actually value the effort you put in? Or are you terrified of looking like a failure because you are entirely obsessed with the external result? And most importantly, when you evaluate your daily labor, what kind of person are you building through your actions?
To synthesize the wisdom of the Royal Axe, work, when done with deep intention, is not a punishment. It is your primary source of meaning.
Right.
Dedication is the sustained engine that drives you forward through the mundane. Perseverance through inevitable difficulty is the only true path to lasting structural progress. Character is the ultimate, indestructible result of your consistent effort. And patience is the master key that unlocks long-term achievement.
Beautifully said.
The path is not easy. It specifically rejects all shortcuts, but it is profoundly, undeniably dignified.
And the journey of building doesn't stop here. In our next deep dive, we're going to continue our progression through Morals and Dogma, moving into chapter 23, which is titled Chief of the Tabernacle.
That's going to be a fascinating one.
If today was about the raw, physical execution of work, swinging the axe, dealing with the mud, next time we are exploring the deep structure, the order, and the spiritual discipline required to actually maintain what you have built so it doesn't fall into ruin, you will definitely want to be here for that one.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into the reality of your day.
Let's hear it.
We discussed how a shortcut actively robs you of the friction required for your own growth. And we discussed how effort permanently shapes your character, entirely regardless of the external outcome.
Right, the internal leveling up.
Exactly. If both of those things are true, then is it mathematically possible that the most painful, humiliating external failure in your life is actually your most spectacular internal success, simply because it required the most immense perseverance just to survive it? Think about that the next time you are standing knee-deep in the mud of reality, staring at your pristine blueprint and wondering if it's all worth it. Great things are not created in moments of convenience. They're built through consistent, dedicated, patient, and often painful effort. Keep swinging the axe. Keep building. We'll see you next time.